Aloha, this is Devin Northrup, and I am recording for aetuts.com, and this is my first aetuts screencast. And today we're going to be creating an animation which imitates the text reveal for Sprint. Let me take you to my website, to fumo.net, and I'll kind of give you a preview of what this looks like. Okay, and we're going to be making one that looks a little bit more like this. Okay, we have a lot to do. Let's get started right away by creating a new composition. We're going to use the HD preset and call the composition main comp. Our duration is going to be 5 seconds, and we'll hit OK. First thing we do is we're going to create the text which we will animate. So we'll grab our text tool and type in aetuts. Can't see anything because our text is white, so we're going to change our text color and add a space in there. We're going to hit the V key to get our selection tool. We'll size up our text a bit, drag it into location, and then we'll move on to the next text layer, which is going to be part of our logo. So let's go ahead and do Command T or Control T, or click our tool up here in the toolbar to get the text tool. I'll type in AE, hit OK, and grab the V selection key, and then we'll do text one more time, Command T, or Control T on the PC, and we'll type in motion graphics. And for this one, we'll use the font Helvetica. Hit OK. Hit the V key again to get our selection tool. Size the text down and move it into position. Okay, we're also going to use a shape for our logo, so let's use the rectangle tool. Sorry, you have to have, in order to use that, you need to not have any of your current layers selected. And then when you do select it, it will give you the shape. So we'll go ahead and click and drag, and let's hold down the Shift key to constrain it to a square. Or we can try to match it pretty close to how big the aetuts text layer is, and we'll hit return or enter. And we'll grab our AE text, we'll move it to the top. Let's change this to a black color. We're going to size it down. And then, just as a little bit of a style, we're going to resize the first letter a little bit. We'll hit OK, and we'll move the move the text layer into the center. Okay, so this looks pretty good. Not too bad. Moving on, the next step is going to be to animate the aetuts and the AE logo. So let's go to about 3 seconds into our animation. We're going to select all of these layers. So we'll grab the aetuts up into the AE text here, and we're going to hit the P key to bring up our position keyframes, and we're going to click that to make it our first keyframe. We'll then drag just a little bit before 15 frames into the animation, and we'll move the text over so that when we play it through, we're going to just get a nice slow move. And then we'll drag our playhead all the way to the front of the animation and drag the text off of the screen. And while I'm dragging, I'm holding on the Shift key so I can keep the motion in a straight line. And if we preview that, looks okay, except we're getting just a little bit of a bounce back, and that is just a little thing that happens sometimes in After Effects. So the way to fix that is by selecting all of our keyframes, which you did, right-clicking on them, clicking on Keyframe Interpolation, and selecting Linear Interpolation. If we do that, then we'll have a nice, smooth animation. Just what we wanted. Okay, the motion graphics text. We're going to go ahead and hit the P key to bring up the position. Click the stopwatch to start a keyframe, and go back, and we're going to drag it the opposite direction so we get a little bit more of a, so we kind of get this logo going in this direction and then the motion graphics going in the other direction. We'll drag it just a little bit more. Okay. And now you might have noticed that I've had all the other animations end at about 3 seconds. The reason I've dragged the motion graphics key final keyframe to the end of our animation is because we're going to be borrowing the keyframes from this text for another text later in the animation. So the next thing we're going to do is pair this animation to use trapcode form. We're going to be applying trapcode form to the logo, and so first we need to pre-compose the logo. So we're going to select the two layers which make up the logo, go layer, pre-compose, and we'll call this logo, and hit OK. Now these two layers are now combined in one layer called logo. Now that we have our logo pre-composed, we're going to make our trapcode form layer. So we'll do that by creating a new solid, which is either Command or Control Y, or you can do layer new solid. And we'll call this logo form, hit OK. And we'll go ahead and get trapcode form from our effects and presets. And for the settings, we'll use the base form. It's going to be the box grid. And the size X, Y, and Z, we need to have that match the size of our composition. So for our composition, we used the HD size. So in order to check the values of your composition, you can hit Command K or Control K on the PC, and it'll bring up your composition settings. So I'm noting that my width is 1920, and so that's going to go into the X value, and then the height is 1080, that's going to go into the Y value. So 1920 by 1080, and we'll just do one particle in the Z and hit OK. And for the number of particles, we'll use the same values, 1920, 1080, and 1. And if you do this correctly, you're going to get a blank gray screen. Looks like we did it correctly. Okay, so we're going to move on to the particle. We want the particle type to remain a sphere, and then we're going to use layer maps. And for the layer, we're going to select the logo, and it seems like it just closed that for us, so we're going to open that back up again. And the functionality we want to get the RGB, which is the color values, and also the A value, which is the alpha channel. So when we do that, our gray screen is going to disappear once we map this over the XY axis. And if we go ahead and turn off our logo layer here, you'll notice that nothing happens, and that's because form is taking the shape of our logo layer. And it'll even change according to the animation. Let's go ahead and we're going to start to play a little bit with the trapcode form. Let's close these values up a little bit. We're going to play with the displacement and twisting and spherical field. So a few things to play with. I'm going to just resize my space a little here so we can see it a bit better. Okay, so for the spherical field, well, let's come back to that later. Let's do our fractal field first. Let's displace it. Okay, that's a nice displacement there. And let's maybe have it affect the size a bit. Now that we've affected the displacement, let's come over and we're going to use our spherical field to kind of create a hole right in the middle of the logo. So we'll Go ahead and position our sphere right in the middle of the logo. And then we'll bump up the strength until we can see our hole. Let's also scale up our logo. We'll offset the X and line it up back to where it was, and the spherical field is probably just a little bit big. We'll bring that down. Let's change the feather. Let's bump up the feather so it's not so strong. So we're going to go ahead and set keyframes for all the things that we just animated. So a quick way to see what we've changed is to click on the logo form layer, hit the U key twice. We're going to be able to see everything that we've modified. So we can see that we've affected the displacement, so we're going to go ahead and click a keyframe for that. We've affected the spherical field, so we're going to go ahead and click a frame for the strength. Sorry, create a keyframe for the strength and also for the scale and the offset. Now if we hit U again twice, we'll be able to see just the properties that we've set keyframes for. If we move forward in time, say about 7 or 8 frames, we can then right click on all of these. So let's select them all. Right click and say reset. And our values are going to be reset to what they were originally. Now it looks like our logo is kind of funny, so we probably need to set keyframes for 1 or 2 more things. That's probably the effect size needs to be changed, so we'll hit a keyframe there and over here as well. And it looks like we got our animation back to normal. So let's trim up our work area. We'll hit the B key to indicate the front of our work area, and then we'll hit the N key. We'll save it and let's do a quick RAM preview. Okay, you can see our logo is blowing up. One more property I'd like to modify is the F scale. Right now the object looks a little bit smooth, so we'll bump up the F scale. Let's try 20. Looks okay. So now it just gives us a little bit crazier of a blowout. And we're also going to hit the U key on the form layer again to bring up all of our keyframes. We're going to tighten that animation up just a bit. We'll move our work area tighter. Now let's just animate this going away. So we'll come out a few more frames after the peak of the animation. We'll make our scale down to 10. And the only reason I'm doing it to 10 right now is so we can still kind of see where it's going. And as you notice, because of the way the center of the animation is working, it's moved over. So let's go ahead and also play with the offset. Move it out to maybe 400, because we kind of want it to explode here and then shoot off this way. So let's do maybe 420. It's a good value for the offset. And let's watch. Looks good. So this animation is looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and create a lens flare that can go inside of this to kind of emphasize the explosionness of this animation. So let's go ahead and create a new solid. However you like to do that. We'll call this main flare. Hit OK. We'll search for our lens flare. Add that to the layer. And we'll go ahead and change the transfer mode of the layer to screen. If you don't see the transfer mode right now, you can hit the toggles and switches, and then we'll select screen. And we'll go ahead and grab the center of the flare, put it right in the middle of our animation, And let's also change the color a bit of our flare, so we'll get the curves. We'll drag that into our lens flare, and let's try to make it a little bit purplish. So we'll bump up the blues a bit, bring out the green. And play with this however you like. Just to get a nice color for our flare. That looks about right. So we're going to animate the flare as well. So let's go ahead and look at our keyframes for the form layer. And we're going to set a keyframe for the center. We're going to go to the beginning of the animation by hitting the J key. J skips to the previous keyframe, K skips to the next keyframe. And we're going to move the center of the flare right to the center of the logo. And we're also going to set a keyframe for the brightness. So at this point we want it to be 0, obviously. And if we hit K to go to the next keyframe, we want the brightness to probably be 140 or so. Pretty bright. Blow this sucker out. So maybe 150. And then we're going to come to the final keyframe. We'll hit K, and again back to 0. We're also going to animate the center to follow the form layer. So we'll just drag the center over. So if we watch it now, we should have a pretty good match. Pretty simple to do. Okay, to me this doesn't explode very much, quite enough, so I'm going to just adjust the scale of the logo form a little bit to maybe 170, which means I need to change the offset a little. And that looks a little better. And also what's going to help is if we tighten up the animation a bit. So we'll just drag some of these keyframes in a little closer, nudge it here and there, and it should make a difference. Okay, let's move on now to the animating the text. So the text, we're going to animate the opacity of the text. And there's a couple ways to do this. We could animate the text out using the text animation properties and set up set up that way. I prefer to just use a mask on this particular case. It's easier. So what we're going to do is select the AE Toots layer, grab our rectangle tool, and we're going to just draw a mask around the layer. And we want to see the keyframes again for the form, so let's open that up. And we're going to go to the beginning of the animation. And we're going to set a keyframe back down here for our mask. So we'll hit the M key, and it brings up the mask path. And then we'll go into our final state. We're going to hit the V key, get our selection, double click on this far line, and just drag it straight across. Hit return. We'll then hit the F key. We want to feather this mask. So let's go partway in between so we can see what it looks like. Let's give that a pretty good feather. It's about 150. And I'm guessing this might be animating a little quick, so let's see what it looks like. Yeah, it is. So let's see. Let's hit the U key to see our keyframes, and let's spread this out just a little bit. We can probably have it disappearing closer to when this form logo disappears. You can start a few keyframes sooner because we'll start right about there. Okay, so just get it so that the A is starting to fade out right when this light comes on. And then that it's about gone when this glow is about gone. So probably about the right speed. I believe we're pretty much wrapped up for this initial part of the animation right here. Now next we need to carry away the trapcode form portion of the animation. We're going to use trapcode particular to do that. So we're going to create a new solid, call it logo particular away. So we're going to go ahead and add particular to this solid. And the first thing we're going to do is change the emitter type to a box. And we're going to change the direction to directional. We're going to rotate it on the y-axis 90 degrees. So it's shooting in this direction. And let's take a look at our animation here. So we kind of have it flash. Right about here, I think we need to start having the particles begin to grow. So we're going to take the position XY and just place it right over our sphere. This is where our particles are going to shoot out from. Okay, next we are going to modify the velocity. It needs to be somewhere around 1300, and let's have no directional spread so that we can kind of gauge how big of a opening we want from a box. So because we want the particles to start off pretty close to each other, and then we're going to add a little spin later. Let's go ahead and set a couple of keyframes. So we'll set a keyframe here for the number of particles. We'll do a page up so we can go one frame backwards, and we'll set a keyframe for 0, and then 2 keyframes forward, maybe 3, set another one for 0. So because we just want about 2 or 3 particles to show up, so maybe we'll move this. Okay, so we got 4, so maybe that should be pretty good, I'm guessing. And I'll have a little bit of random velocity in there. Looks good. So the next thing we need to do is create the streaming trails behind it. This is done by using the auxiliary system. And we'll go ahead and have the auxiliary system emit from main particles. And you can see that we're having little particle trails following our main particles. And after we've done that, let's take our main particles and actually take the size down to 0. We don't want to see those anymore. We're going to bump our particles per second up a lot. This is on the auxiliary system again, until we get some nice solid, there we go, some nice solid lines. Let's also play with the size over life. We're going to have it start kind of, probably just do a diagonal, maybe a little bit more rounded. So it's going to kind of taper off at the end. And for the opacity over life, we're going to kind of do something like that. So it's best to do this in nice one nice swoop. So it's going to kind of give us a, I don't know what to describe this as. It'll be kind of soft on the front and more solid inside, but a little bit more solid at the front than the back. And then for the color, just take a gradient here. You can use this preset, and then we're going to just modify it. Get kind of a purplish gray. And then we're going to do a darker purple. Like that. And we're going to bump up the life a little bit, and we'll see how that turns out here in a minute. Right now our strings are a little bit boring, so we're going to come into the physics, and under the air category we are going to turn up the spin amplitude just a little bit. Looks like this closed on me again, so we're going to come back into the physics, air, and just play with the spin a little bit, get it so the particles are moving around a little bit more. Also, we are going to play with the turbulence field. We want this to affect the position. Okay, one thing I noticed is the life is way too long on the auxiliary system. So we're going to bring that down a bit. Maybe just a little bit more. That's good. And we're going to bump up the velocity just a bit. Okay, we can start with that. One thing you'll notice is our particles and their trails seem to be following each other. We actually want the auxiliary particles to, I'm just bumping them up by the way so we can get a better solid line. We actually want the auxiliary particles kind of drift on their own, and the way to do that is come into settings. And over here we have some extra settings for the auxiliary system, and so we would like them to inherit the velocity. Let's give it a 50% value and watch what that does. Okay, so we got this particles kind of taken care of. We're still seeing a few gaps. We can fill those in by bumping up the particles per second in the auxiliary system. Might be affecting the position a little too much, and one other thing we can do is increase the time before the particle strings are affected. What that does is it kind of lets the particles shoot out straight at first and then kind of do their little smoky trail thing closer to the end. And so that one's kind of got to play with that one a little bit. Okay, this looks pretty good. See how it kind of goes straight and then it kind of smokes off at the end. So one thing I've noticed is I've done this animation a couple times now, and every time I do it the settings seem to be different. So you're going to want to play with the affecting position, the scale, and the amount of spin. So those are some of the things you want to play with, and you can even play a little bit with the amount of velocity that's being inherited. So maybe we could even take that down a little bit. And you can see how that's affecting it. Maybe bring the emitter size down and increase the spin. I like that. So let's stick with that for now. Okay, so again, we want the timing to kind of happen as this starts to fade. We want the particles to kind of come out of it as if it's a continuation of the form object kind of wisping away. So let's just check our timing. Okay, so that actually looks pretty good. Just a couple little cleanup items here. You can see we've got a little bit of the letters still showing up, so let's go down to AE Tuts. And we'll click U to see our keyframes. Go to the last keyframe here. We'll just modify this a little bit, completely close off that layer. Hit OK. The other thing we need to work on is the trapcode form layer. If you remember, we modified the scale to go down to 10 so we could still see kind of where it ended up. We're going to go ahead and take that down to 0 because we do want it to disappear completely. And that segment is done. The next step is to animate the motion graphics text into a new phrase. So as this flashes, we want it to fade away. What we're going to do is just go ahead and duplicate the layer by doing Command D or Control D on the PC. And we're going to double click it and we're going to change it. Type in made easy. And hit enter. And pull up the position keyframes. And Let's we want it to kind of center it up a little bit. Now the trick with moving this text is when you move it, make sure the playhead is on one of the keyframes, and then click here and select position, and it selects all the keyframes. When you do that, you can actually move all of the keyframes at once. And you can see that because this line, which represents the motion, follows suit. So just a little trick. Okay, so over here, we're going to go back to where this flash is biggest. And double check that we're looking at the flare, and that looks right. So right here we want this to be fading in. So let's go ahead and animate the opacity by hitting the T key and set a keyframe to go to 0 for this one. And then for the motion graphics, hit the T key, opacity is at 100, and then we'll move to 0. And we might even actually, let's move these over just a little bit, hold down the Option key, and it'll kind of shrink our animation for us. Might actually want to even bring the flare's brightness up to kind of cover up this text a little bit. That'll probably make a little better looking animation. Oh, it looks like I don't know how to spell. Let's change that. Okay, looks good. And so the next thing is we're going to make one more version of Chopcode form. And so we'll go ahead and create a new solid. Control Y. We'll call this easy form. Okay. And we'll go to Effects and Presets and apply Chopcode form to this layer. Go into the settings and we'll change the size, and we're basically, it's actually setting this up over the text. We're going to be creating the stringy stuff that kind of goes behind here. So we basically want to match about just a little bit bigger than the size of this text. That's pretty good. And we're also going to change this to strings. And the number of strings and Y we're going to have be 3. Next thing we're going to do is adjust the fractal field. We're going to displace it a fair amount. We're going to also, we want it to be flowing to the right, and we want it to be kind of evolving a bit. Let's take a look at how that looks. Sorry, let's solo that. I think we're going to decrease the size in Y. And for the particle, let's change the color to kind of purplish. Turn up the disperse. Turn on the evolution a little bit. Okay, and let's just increase the size a little bit. About 3. So now if we put that behind text, kind of have the effect we're looking for. One last thing we're going to want to do is create little flares that accent the Chopcode form part here. So let's actually just duplicate our main flare so we can kind of copy the color settings. We're going to take the flare center, we're going to leave it off. And for the brightness, we're going to go from 0 to something small, 16, 17. It's going to just be quick and easy. I'm going to use Option left bracket to trim it, and then Option right bracket to trim the out point. Let's see how that looks. Okay, so it looks all right. Let's move the flare center here. We're going to duplicate the layer and actually the layer selected, duplicate it, offset it a bit. We'll move the flare center to here. And we'll change the brightness at its peak to, say, 13, so it's not quite as bright. Duplicate this again. Make the center of this one on this end. Check the keyframes, and we'll make its brightness go up to 20. And then let's do a couple of little small ones. So we'll duplicate this one, open it up, set the max to about 8 or even 7, and we'll center this one kind of down on this end, duplicate it, move the center, and duplicate it one more time, move it, and change the center to right there. So now, if we preview this little segment, we're going to kind of now we're going to be able to see the kind of little flashy part of this. Alright, not too bad. I want to slow these animations down just a little bit, so we will do that by selecting all the layers, hitting U. Just do this one at a time. We'll just drag it out and drag it out. You might even want to randomize this a little bit, so maybe some we want to be a little longer. Some maybe we'll just leave. Just depends. Now, if you hold down the Option key, it proportionately scales the animation keyframes as you drag. Okay. And there you go. And maybe that's a little too flashy all at once. So you can just kind of spread these out a little bit. Pretty good. Okay. We're going to rename this just a flare. So we know this isn't actually the main flare. There you go. And then the next thing we're going to do is, I actually did some little text effects on here. So we're going to pre-compose this layer. We'll call this Made Easy Text. We're going to double click it or option click it in Adobe CS3 or below, and we're going to create an adjustment layer. And this adjustment layer is going to, well, first let's go to the text. We're going to add a ramp to the text. So I'll have the top color be white. The bottom color will make it kind of an orangish color like so. And on the adjustment layer, we'll give it a glow. We don't want. Change that so it gives it kind of an orangish glow. Looks good. I'm going to do kind of two glows actually. Let's take this one and duplicate it. Okay, so this one will just have kind of a smaller radius. And for this one, I'll give it a pretty big radius. So we can kind of have a real strong glow effect. And then we're going to use the adjustment layer, and we're going to add some masks. And then we're going to animate these. So our first flare kind of starts up at about 315. So we're going to put our playhead right there. And you'll notice it lines it up for us already. And we're going to animate the masks. So let's go ahead and hit the M key, bring up the mask path, and hit a keyframe. And we're going to start with it off. And we're going to move it all the way over and off. And we're also going to feather it. So it kind of does a little glow thing for us. F key lets us modify the feather. Spread that out. We're going to add another mask. Oops. And feather this one also. So this one's going across. This one will kind of come across on the other side. So hit the M key to adjust its keyframes. This one goes off, and then this one will move over here. Maybe we'll have this one come back a little bit on this side. Kind of just get kind of a randomized glow. Let's take a look at that. And then let's just slow down that animation sequence. Hold down the Option key. Now looks good. And if we bring it back into our main composition, we have our flares and we have the glow. It seems to correspond with each other. Okay, now it's just a matter of making it look pretty. So let's add a background. Call this BKG. We're going to go ahead and use a ramp. And we'll bring it to the background. Let's make it a radial ramp. Let's make this ramp kind of a reddish. So we'll kind of do down in that area, looks good. And gives us a nice soft radial blur. See the easy form, we need it to fade on. So about here we will hit the T key to get our opacity and say go to 0, go from 0 to probably not 100, let's go to about 50. That'll look good. You can see in our motion graphics text, let's take a look at that. Sure enough, we didn't do the keyframe all the way down to 0. And let's take a back look at our particular. Let's make the colors more in line with what we currently have. So we'll go to the auxiliary system, color over life, lighten it up a little bit. And we're also going to turn the opacity down on this one to about 60. And let's also do a blur. Let's put a blur on some of these. So we'll do a fast blur. About a 2 pixel fast blur. Do the same thing for the easy form. Let's do about a 2 pixel fast blur. And let's also take this form layer, let's duplicate it. And let's make the opacity 20. And let's make it a little different. Let's offset the evolution. Make this one a little bit blurrier. And again, we're going to make sure this one's really hard to see. We'll hit T and bring the opacity down a bunch. Just give it a little bit softer, wispier look. And let's do the same thing for our particular. Let's duplicate it. And we're going to make our bottom one much more transparent. And to give it differentiated a little bit, we can, perhaps we could play with the emitter size and Y. And let's also, sometimes this works, sometimes this doesn't. Let's add a different random seed. And we can also change the spin frequency, the spin amplitude. Just give us a little bit of a background on that. Looks like one thing we forgot to do is animate the motion graphics text on. Really quick, let's just grab hit the Q key to get our mask. Just drag across. And about 2 is when we want this to be on. So let's hit the M key to find our mask shape, hit the keyframe, hit shift key to feather. We're going to turn our feathering way up. Go back early in our animation and we'll move our mask off. So it slowly just kind of gets stroked on, like so. Okay, this tropical form layer got knocked out, so we'll go from 0 to, this one's supposed to go to 20. I guess this one's going to 50. This one's going to 20. Bring that down even more. We're also going to fade off the form layers here, so let's just grab those two, click our keyframes to maintain those keyframes, and then we're going to just fade them away down to 0. So we're left with just the text. And that's it. It only took an hour for us to go through how to make a 5-minute animation. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. If you have any questions, please post your comments. I'll try to answer them as best I can. And if you have any, if you'd like to, you could visit my website, tufuga.net, tufuga.net, N-E-T, and hope to do more tutorials for you in the future. Thanks. Aloha.